One of the things that I just wanted to understand a little bit more was you mentioned all of these great virtues of the Shaykh Abdul Ghani Al-Maqdisi. Is he then also included among the Mujaddid people of his time?
Alhamdulillah. Rasulullah. For Abdul Ghani bin Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi, he is one of the Mujaddideen in the field of hadith because he took a hadith and he brought it somewhere new and opened it to a much wider demographic and made the study of a hadith easier and
MashaAllah.
the ability to grasp the sciences for regular people and students. You will
SubhanAllah.
find Umdat al-Ahkam, the Sughra or the Kubra. I've been to many Muslim houses and I've usually find that right alongside like the 40 Hadith or Imam
Yes.
or Riyadh al-Salihin. Like I always find Umdat al-Ahkam.
No.
Most of the houses, I always, some way, somehow, either the Kubra or the Sughra, it's usually the Sughra, because the Sughra is easier, it fits on the shelf easier. But sometimes you'll find the Kubra, which is bigger, you'll find that in there. But he's one of those people that the Ummah has met him with acceptance. Not just scholars, the Ummah has met him with acceptance. He's been met with acceptance by the Ummah. He's been met with acceptance by them for his virtue, his rank, and that book. And you'll see the book in many different sizes. Sometimes it's a pocket size.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a larger size. Sometimes it's A4, A5. You see it in many different sizes. But the one thing is, you see it everywhere.
The fact that we're still studying his works 800 years later, and the fact that he's still within this curriculum of Islam, that's just
Yes.
subhanAllah, remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, a hadith, I can't imagine. I don't know how you'd be in the field of a hadith and his name doesn't come up. I don't know how. Because either you studied his book, because even Bulugh al-Maram is the response to his book. It's a response. Because before that time, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, the elder and the younger, had written commentaries on Umdat al-Ahkam. Those big Shafi'i scholars, the Shafi'i and the Maliki, they wrote commentaries on it because they acknowledged the primacy of that book. And having looked at both books, you can appreciate what Bulugh al-Maram attempted to accomplish, that we want this to be like a rival, a friendly rival to that, like an accomplished rival to that kitab.
It's so remarkable to me that when we look throughout the whole history of Islam, all of the ulama, now there have been so many ulama, but when you look at each curriculum of every ilm of the shar', then for example, this sheikh, he's in hadith, and you find also in fiqh, like the Umdatul Ahkam and the like. So the fact that he's in the curriculum, which means that for centuries more, this curriculum will be learned, the fact that he's in the curriculum just shows his importance in this religion.
Yeah, his rank is huge. I mean, if you look at his biography on Tabaqat is 22 pages. His biography. Like what we covered a lot of, I'd say we covered like half of everything. His main, we did a good outline of his biography, but it's 22 pages. His biography. It's a huge biography. And he had this massive footprint. And so when people are looking at the footprint that this man has left, you're looking at his footprint in i'tiqad, in fiqh, in hadith. And then within hadith, you have like things within things, like within asma al-rijal, within jarh and ta'dil, right? Within like explaining things, within like the explaining of a hadith, within jamal hadith, like gathering the hadith, right? You have all these different fields that he is cited in and mentioned as an authority. And then his name, if he agrees with a hadith, like Diya al-Maqdisi, وَصَحَحَهُ al-Diya, and al-Diya has said it's sahih. Sometimes you'll see like وَصَحَحَهُ al-Maqdisi, and Maqdisi said it's sahih. And some people make the mistake, they think that Diya al-Din and al-Maqdisi, when they see that, they think it's the same person, but it's not. It's when it has وَصَحَحَهُ al-Maqdisi, that is Abdul Ghani bin Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi. But when you see وَصَحَحَهُ al-Diya, that means Diya al-Din al-Maqdisi. Right, that lets you know as well his rank, his huge rank, huge rank. And then there's even ikhtilaf, because there's ikhtilaf about Diya al-Din and Abdul Ghani bin Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi. Like, okay, who's the greatest, right? And what they tend to fall down on is that Al-Hafiz Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid, he is the most knowledgeable in like the hifz.
Mm.
But when you're talking about detailed matters of like Asma al-Rijal, things like that, it's like, okay, the al-Din is probably like edged him in that area, right? But you have to remember, he dies 643 Hijri. So he has
Mm.
like another 43 years of like living because he lived, he had all that time to live after Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi.
Mhm.
And in a way, you can say, well, he's kind of like ilm wise, he's kind of like a
Mm.
child of Abdul
No.
Ghani. He's like one of his children. So, okay, he might have surpassed him in one area, but the only way he was able to do that is by following his books as well. So it's like, even though he surpassed him in that area,
Mm.
he's still under his
Yes.
his wing. Right. So he still has this huge uh legacy that he's left behind that everyone when you look at like al-Umda fil fiqh is like from that legacy,
Mhm.
right? These books, Al-Kafi belongs to that legacy because you can see the comparing of notes, that legacy. When they're coming out of Jami al-Hanabila one day, Muwaffaq Qudamah and Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi, they're walking one day and they both came out because they used to hold durus in the same circle. And they're coming out, and some of the local sheikhs had come to try to debate with them. And both of them used to really smile whenever they answered questions. They had had a really big smile when they answered
Mhm.
questions. And they said that, and Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi said, Muwaffaq Qudama has a bigger smile than me. And when he smiles, it's like he's killing people with his smile
Mm.
because he's answering the questions so
Oh.
easily and it's making them angry. So he's killing them with
Allah.
his smile.
Oh,
He's
subhanallah.
killing them with his smile because Muwaffaq Qadam was known for being
Oh.
like really jovial, but Abdul Ghani ibn
Wow.
Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi was really jovial himself. He said, no, he's more jovial than me. Like he has a bigger smile than me.
Allah.
He's killing people with his smile.
MashaAllah.
And he was known for having like really bright white teeth and a really jovial smile. And that's a wisdom we can also take away
Mhm.
of just
Yes.
like doing the sunnah of like the miswak, or if we can't do that, just like keeping our teeth as clean as we can, right? Brushing them, because the fact that that was mentioned means that he was really, really particular about like dental care.
Yes,
So
mashallah.
he really took like special care of like his teeth, like brushed regularly. No one mentioned that, oh, he had food between his teeth. Or no. He
Mm.
took care of his teeth and he used the miswak regularly. That's
And,
alhamdulillah. We can take a lot from that.
and I find interesting since you mentioned that these shuyukh were smiling. Obviously, it's a normal thing to do, but when you just read about these towering figures, like it also makes them like you can relate more to them because
Yes.
when we read about them, okay, we look at their ibadah, their ilm, their jihad, it's all serious. But
Yes.
the fact that you hear these, like the way they smile and talk, like you
Yes.
really can relate to
Yeah,
that.
because someone might think if they read about their lives
Mm.
without reading the detailed
Right.
biographical accounts, they might think that they're stern all the time. Like
Mm.
they never
Yeah,
smiled. They
exactly.
were frowning, you
Subhanallah.
know. And it's like now some scholars were biljed.
Mm.
Some scholars were very sober.
Yeah.
Like Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal radiallahu anhu, he was very sober.
SubhanAllah.
He was very sober. But he would smile from time to time, but he was just very sober. And that's why
Mm.
you have the account where Yahya bin Ma'in is sitting in a gathering and someone laughed. And Yahya bin Ma'in, he kind of gave him a really strong look and said, how dare you laugh in front of Ahmad bin Hanbal? Because Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal is just, he was so sober. So people
Allah.
felt really strange about like laughing in his presence. Hey, you don't do that. Abu Umar al-Maqdisi was a very sober person, right?
Mm.
So when he walked, like in his ahwal, it's mentioned that when little children saw him walking and got near, they'd run away because he was so sober.
SubhanAllah.
And they were just like, oh, we don't want to do anything bad. They were scared to like, if they were playing or doing something bad,
SubhanAllah.
they'd run away. So he was very sober.
And
But Muwaffaq
mm,
Qudama was not very sober,
right.
right? He was very jovial, right?
MashaAllah.
Being described as bashashin, like smiley, like he
Wow.
was very
SubhanAllah.
smiling and inviting and greeting. So people didn't feel that same fear of Muwaffaq
Yes.
Qudama. Didn't feel that fear. They didn't feel that same fear of Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi. They didn't have that fear. So it's different. They were different people, but they
Hmm.
all represent that same because they're all from the same lantern
Hmm.
of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of following it. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sometimes sober, but sometimes
Mm.
very inviting and happy.
Subhanallah.
And some people took different things from that. So you'll find some people that they fell on the line of the more sober aspects of Rasulullah
Mm.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then there's people that took on the more bashashan. They've taken on the more
Yes.
smiling, inviting aspect. And both of those are correct. Neither of those is wrong. They're both correct.
And like Sheikh Hasan Al-Basri, he's like written like was all serious, right? Like
Yes,
not
yes,
smiling
he
a
was very
lot.
serious. He was very serious. And I see the same thing in some of my teachers. Some of my teachers are would have been perhaps would be perhaps classified as more harsh or
Mm.
not very smart. Like my Palestinian teacher, I'm trying to think, maybe once or twice in a gathering or when we're around him, he'd smile. Like if I really think about it, in the 4 years I was
Hmm.
like maybe 4 times do I remember him smiling.
Wow.
He was like really sober,
Wow.
very,
Mm.
very sober, very sober. Like maybe a couple of times I saw his teeth.
Wow.
Whereas like the Egyptian teachers were always smiling.
MashaAllah.
You know, they might be hard on us, but they're
Mm.
like, yes, now you're really going to get it today. They'd be like smiling. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You have 10 pages. But we had 5 years. Oh, you've got 10 pages today. You need to do we're doing the Hameems today. I hope
SubhanAllah.
everyone's ready. No lunch until evening. It's like, oh, subhanAllah. They're like
SubhanAllah.
smiling. I'm going to get you. You know, they're really,
Yeah.
really smiling. Right. Our Syrian teacher was generally bashashan and
Mm.
smiley. Uh, uh, our Mauritanian teacher was smiley from time to time, but the Mauritanian teacher we had was more bashashan than the other one, whereas
Okay.
the Palestinian teacher, like I said, he fell more on the side of that. And then our teacher that we had when I was in Ashland from Arabia, like from the Nejid, he was like really sober, like
Okay.
really, really sober.
SubhanAllah.
Like he smiled from time to time, but not laughing. Like if
Mm.
he came in, like we'd be sitting talking and we might laugh about something. And when we saw the door swing on him come, just like everything just shuts down. You know,
Mm.
the books come out, everything is just like because he's just the manner that he had. You know, and all the teachers, because he was going to university as well, the teachers like, yes, he's a very serious student. Like
Hmm.
everyone said, like
Yeah.
but all of those are correct reflections of the Sunnah.
MashaAllah.
All of
SubhanAllah.
that's correct. And
Incredible.
people have their preferences. Like some people don't like, when it's too sober, and the same thing with teaching styles. Like a teaching style, some people don't,
Mm.
some people like to be able to interject during the class.
Hmm.
And some people like to interject after the
Yes.
class.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's like a more Syrian style is subhanAllah, if you interject during, the look that you get from people because of what you're doing, you're not supposed to do that. Whereas the Egyptians, it's expected,
No.
right? It's expected that, and sometimes it will depend. Sometimes it also depends on the mood. Like it's not expected that you'll come in during tafsir because tafsir ayat of the Quran are being recited. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reciting his ayat, his speech is being read, right? You're not being expected to interrupt when you're hearing the speech of Allah being said, right? That's kind of everyone kind of has that understanding. Yeah, you probably shouldn't say anything during that time. But for
Mm.
fiqh, like the fiqh class of Egyptian, quite rowdy, right?
No.
Syrians is very quiet. Like our class, like the class we have through Manada Sabia with Sheikh Muhammad Ra, that's like really quiet. Like
Wow.
someone tried to interject and they got like shut down.
Subhan-
Like if you just wait until after, that's when
Mm.
like the only time you can say something is like sometimes there'll be an awkward pause because the text is being read live and the qadi of the text is like, I'm not sure, is this word, because the word today we
Mm.
had was Nora, which like, is it Nora or Nura? And the sheikh
Mm.
is like, it's Nora. It's like, okay, all right. That's it. It's like, that's the only signs. Then
That's it. Yeah.
after the sheikh will say, are there any questions? Is there any questions for anyone? It's okay. We're all students. We've entered the last part of the class. Because people are scared now.
And and this is related to his Shami background, right?
Yes, this is what this is coming from.
SubhanAllah.
Whereas the Egyptians, you'll see like an Egyptian will be teaching a class and you already see hands up. It's like, why is the hand up on the Zoom call with like a hand or in person? Like you'll
Yeah.
see people are interjecting, right, during the class. Or
Hmm.
sometimes an Egyptian teacher will intentionally go into the crowd and say, you, what about this statement?
Mm.
What would you understand from
Wow,
that?
mashallah. Incredible. I
And
like
so
that.
now they start calling on people.
Yeah, that's really good.
Like someone yesterday, such and such from yesterday. You were very talkative. Now I want to hear more of what you have to say. What
Subhanallah.
about this ruling? So when we were doing the first time we went through Bulugh al-Maram, it was with an Egyptian teacher, and you would, if you're reading, we would sometimes sign up to be the reader because you're less likely to get called on if you're the reader.
Wow.
So we're like, oh, I don't want to be called on. But then he started, when he saw that that was happening, he's like, okay, so to the reader, what is the difference between Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Abdullah ibn Abbas in narration? Like, I was like, what?
Oh,
Because you're thinking, oh man, so you thought you were going to get
yeah.
away because you're a reader. He's like,
Subhanallah.
no, he said everyone has to be asked. Oh, subhanAllah. It's like, yeah, so you can read all you like, you can do everything else. You will not escape.
Those sheikhs, they catch everything.
Yeah, because they realize, wait a minute, this
Subhanallah.
guy is not, he's happy just to read and sit there, but the others are now receiving, whatever reading they're getting or whatever else. Like, no, 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 no. Everyone will be asked, right? Versus the other teaching style or styles, right? And all of them, that's all from this deen. All of it's from the deen.
No,
And
subhanallah.
people have their preferences. I see that some brothers that uh, they go to Egypt or whatever else find it sometimes difficult to
Hmm.
concentrate in the classes in Syria because they have questions and their minds can't move on without
Mm.
that question being answered because it's in their mind. They're like, man, I
Yes,
really need
indeed.
to, because they stop, but they're like, I need to. So their mind doesn't go on because you want to have that question answered. And so they find they struggle in those classes. And then you'll find some of the brothers that are Shamis, the Egyptians. I'm not, no offense, brother Abu Jafar, but you guys are kind of rude when it comes to like
Hmm.
teaching. And it's like,
Yeah,
well, why would you say we're rude? It's like the
subhanallah.
classes are really loud and noisy. It's like, subhanAllah, this is ilm. It's like, yeah,
Mm.
that's why it's noisy though,
Yeah,
because the
exactly.
process of transmitting ilm is noisy.
And
So,
yeah, yeah. It's like also when you look at Sheikh Mutawalli al-Sha'rawi, like his classes, subhanallah, are super rowdy, like the way he's
yes.
like
Yes,
his
and he's interacting with the crowd.
yeah.
Sometimes you can hear him like there'll be someone who maybe say, "Well, the sheikh is like, yes, absolutely." And who else knows about this? Or sometimes the sheikh will mention the first part of the ayah
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
rest of the
exactly.
class finishes it. It's like
Exactly.
that's a very Egyptian thing
Subhanallah.
to do. But
MashaAllah.
some people from outside would think, it's kind of rude,
Yes.
right? Same thing when they see like one of our teachers was like reclining, like when he would narrate hadith, he would lay down on his right
Mhm.
side. Now that's subhanallah, that's out of the question for our Palestinian or our Sham. That's out of the question. That's
Mm.
no way they're going to let you do that.
SubhanAllah.
But for a Mauritanian,
No.
yeah, that's okay.
Right.
Why not? Right? It's why not do it?
SubhanAllah.
Right? Because it's just seen as what is the issue?
Mm.
Right? Because they'll say, wait a minute. Because one of the brothers brought this to our Mauritanian teacher, well, why this? They said, well, wait a minute. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, didn't he sometimes used to recite Quran while reclining?
Mm.
It's like, well, yeah, and he recited Quran sitting, lying down on his side. It's like, okay,
Interesting.
this then if this is what we can do, then why is there the prohibition against this?
Right. Okay.
Right? What are you going to do
SubhanAllah.
about this?
So, so
These
it's
are the
a
words of Rasulullah
mm.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's
Listen.
like, oh, okay. So because some of us had not heard those ahadith where he was reclining, and then some of us hadn't heard them. So when
Right.
we heard
Yes.
them, it was new. Oh, subhanallah.
Interesting.
Because the first time we saw him recline like that, we're like, is the sheikh okay? Is he like
So,
one of us reached out to like kind of try to catch him, thinking maybe he's falling. It's like, no, no, no. He's just reclining because he's at his most comfortable
mm.
narrating like this. He feels his best.
So it's basically a khilaf within adab.
Yes, this is the thing that happens. And you have to get used
MashaAllah.
to
Naam.
these types of things. Yes, people have their preference. No one's denying that.
Mm-hmm.
People have their preference, but your preference should not stop you from accessing ilm.
MashaAllah.
There's certain things that I might not prefer, but it doesn't stop me. I can adapt.
Mm-hmm.
I can adapt because I've had all those teaching styles. I've had all those teaching styles. And so now I have my preferences, but I've had all those styles and I'm able to adapt and it doesn't hurt me at all. Yeah, I think it's actually made me more versatile. And I in my own teaching, but it depends on what I'm teaching. I go between things.
Mm-hmm.
Some things you can't have a lot of question and answer because you need to be able to complete a thought. But for some things like my tafsir classes, the Q&A is always after. Signs of the time in after. The Sama classes, the Sama is going to be after.
Hmm.
But when it comes to fiqh is interjection. It's
Right.
time for interjection, understanding things, grasping data, trying to grasp things. Usul of fiqh is interjection because, especially usul of fiqh, because in sort of fiqh, it's very easy to lose your train of thought. And then you're a sort of fiqh, if you don't have, for me, if you don't have answering happening during the class,
Hmm.
it's very easy that someone could misunderstand a particular
Yes.
asl in a sort of fiqh, and they've taken away a wrong understanding. Yeah,
SubhanAllah.
and the process of unpacking or fixing that understanding is very difficult.
Mm.
So sort of fiqh, you have to have a really busy, rowdy class.
SubhanAllah.
You have to.
Hmm.
You have to.
Hmm.
But that's just my perception. Maybe someone could say, well, no, it helps them focus better if the
Sure.
class is maybe,
Interesting,
but
yeah.
I find that it's easier when I teach it in that way.
Hmm.
Right?
Interesting, mashallah. There are like different methods of teaching as well, basically,
Yeah.
that SubhanAllah.
Yeah, and everyone has their reasoning why and their discussion because they can quote the narrative where when the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was teaching the companions, they'd be so still that birds could land on their heads and their heads wouldn't
SubhanAllah.
move. Yeah, that's one of the proofs the Shamis use for having an orderly class. That's true. But then there are other narratives of other times where the companions are really active.
Mm.
They're really active and engaged in the class, and questions are going back and forth.
Mm.
Right. So
No,
it's not one size fits all. It's not one size fits all. It's
indeed.
a matter of preference and etiquette and what's considered more proper with respect to propriety. It's what's being considered. And
And
people have their methods.
this breaks down the whole dichotomy idea of the West, where you have to do one thing only, and that's it.
Yes, yes, because we're only going to do this. Everyone sits on the desks and they're behind the desks. The teacher walks in front of the class. Good morning, Mr. Stevens. It's like that simply is not the
Hmm.
mode of how people learn. Even as which is another thing. In some durus, when I was in Mahad, sometimes the teacher's sitting in the middle of a circle around
Okay.
us. And then sometimes the teacher's sitting at the front of a circle.
Mm.
They just it's a preference. It's a preference. Sometimes the sheikh is sitting in the middle of the circle of students, and then sometimes he's sitting at the head of the circle. Sometimes he's reading from the kitab with no qari, and sometimes he has a qari and he's explaining the text as a reading qari,
Mm.
right?
SubhanAllah.
And then sometimes you have a qari and a page turner. So the person turns the pages and the qari and the sheikh is
Hmm.
explaining. And then he'll go back, like he'll say, okay, read the metin. And you read the metin and say, okay, now read the metin with the shah. And then you turn to the page, you're going back and forth and explaining things. It's just
Hmm.
it's down to methodology. And these are things that have been laid down for only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how long these things have been
Hmm.
laid down.
There's a thought that comes into my mind, and I thought maybe I'll mention it, so it might be beneficial. Often the actions of a teacher, of a sheikh, that is basically the shara, right? So for example, if you as a teacher and a sheikh do a certain thing, people, even if you don't mention a hadith or an ayah or a fiqh ruling, just by your actions, people take you actually as ahkam, right? Hukum.
Yeah, this is one of the ways that Imam Ahmed's ahkam are transmitted.
Mm.
Like for example, if somebody saw that Imam Ahmed he would look away or bare his teeth at something, that's a proof that that was disgusting. That's like something haram or bad act.
Mm-hmm. SubhanAllah.
But if he winced or waved his hand, is disliked. Or la ya'jabani, that doesn't that's not good to me. I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. That's makruh. But if he like turned away and like sneered, it's like okay, that's haram. Like that's haram,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or if he stood up, like and he said, "Oh, this ya'jibani, this makes me very that's this mustahab. It's something. Oh yes, you should definitely do this." Right. So sometimes it's how the teacher will say what he's saying that also is it's passed on with the statement as well. So it's
SubhanAllah.
like so okay, the statement's mustahab, and then what helps the statement to be also driven home as mustahab is that he got really like he smiled or he became really excited when narrating it, or he became really angry and
Mm-hmm.
agitated. When he became agitated, when he said, and this must never be done. Why do people keep doing this? Like, okay, all right, this is definitely something that is disliked.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's haram, like he quoted the ayat and like he like emphasized the last part of the ayah, you know, walahum adabun azim, like that part on
Mm.
the end, like okay, there, yeah, that's haram, right? Because not only did he quote the ayah showing it's haram, but like, with that last part that sometimes teachers will do, azim or things like that's done for effect, that's done for
Mm-hmm.
ta'kid. Like هذا عذاب عليم عذاب
Mm.
عظيم هذا عذاب مقيم, right? That effort, like when teachers do that, that's ta'kid. That's being done to like drive home that listen, don't do that. That's why that's done. So that
Oh.
that becomes part of the transmission of
Mm.
like the ilm. And that's why Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, it's interesting, like he even when he narrated a hadith, he would imitate the vocal inflections of the Prophet
Wow.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So
Subhanallah.
he's transmitting all of it. He's
Allah.
transmitting all of it. And
Incredible.
that's why he was the most shadid on people, where that's why when the man, I mentioned the incident where he saw the man take the rain gutter and replace it back in its place. He said, "What are you doing that for?" He said, "Oh, it was spouting water along the pathway." And he said, "Yeah, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pass by that spout every day,
Oh.
and he never replaced it. Why would you do that?"
Allahu Akbar.
So it's
Mm.
like he took the following of the Sunnah like that seriously.
Incredible.
Or where he stopped this camel in the middle of the road and got off, and then got back on and rode. And someone said, "What did he do that for?" Because it seemingly didn't seem like it had any purpose. And he said, "I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do this
Sallallahu
once."
Alaihi Wasallam.
Like that's how
Wow.
much of the Sunnah was transmitted to where he, like in his daily etiquettes. And those are part of the Sunnah, like the Sunnah to adat. Like those are
Mm-hmm.
like his adat. You don't necessarily have to follow that, but he's going that extra limit, that
Mm-hmm.
extra level because
Oh.
of the love for the Sunnah.
I remember reading a statement in Manaqib al-Imam Ahmad by Ibn al-Jawzi where I do not remember exactly what it was, but a man, I believe, who said to his son, there was an action being done by Imam Ahmad, and he said that Imam Ahmad does not do any action without having an evidence in the Quran and the Sunnah. So
Hmm.
it will be related to the Shar regardless of whatever he does.
Yes, some way, somehow. Even someone said to him, "Oh, well, they brought him a watermelon." And he
Mm,
said, I don't eat those. And I said,
mm.
why? He said, well, because I'm not sure if this melon and the one in his time were the same
Oh,
to where I could get the reward for it. So I just don't eat it.
subhanallah.
Because the difference between like the sweet melon versus the
So,
watermelon, there's just like I'm not sure whether I'll get the same reward eating this versus eating it. So I don't eat it. I
subhanallah.
just didn't eat it.
Incredible,
Even
man.
though it would have been fine, but he just thought because I don't know whether I'll get the maximum reward, just don't eat it.
This shows the responsibility of the teacher, right? So, for example, if he engages in something that's impermissible or disliked, people will think it's permissible because
Yes,
he's
because
known.
they'll take that
Yeah.
person as a proof. And
Yes.
this is why Abdul Ghani Al-Lubidi rahimahullah, he was so angry about beard shaving in his time.
Wow.
He said, I find this to be such a serious problem. He said, you'll find mu'adhins, people who are hafiz of the Quran and some fuqaha
Mm.
with shaved beards, and people use them as their evidence. Wala hawla
Yes.
wala quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Like that's how he ended it. Because
Wow.
that's how he because
Oh,
he's like this it's because it's such a calamity
yes.
because people will say, well, someone's look at that.
Exactly.
None of the muezzins in my area have beards. What's the problem? So
Mm.
I shave mine. What's the faqih so and so? He shaves his. Because
Yes.
there's a difference between not having one versus you're known to shave it.
Mhm. Nah.
But yeah, so and so he shaves his.
Yes.
What's the problem?
Yes, exactly.
Right? So then people become a hujjah. So you have to be careful. You don't want to become a hujjah in blameworthy
Yes. Subhanallah.
characteristics. If you're a hujjah, you'd rather be a hujjah in the matters of the deen, the compulsory aspects of the deen, number one. And then number two, you want to become a hujjah if it's specific characteristics where, it might be something cultural. That's okay then. You
Mhm.
can take and leave it, what you do. You can take and leave it, how you do things. Right. Yeah, I don't, so and so doesn't do this, but I'm careful. Like if I follow really stringent rulings,
Mhm.
I do follow a lot of the more rigid rulings, but I try not to do them in front of people.
Mm.
Or I try not to, or if I have to explain, hey, I noticed you're doing it. Yeah, listen, I do that. But that's not the final,
Mhm.
that's not the mu'tamid, or that's not
No.
the jamhur. It's just something that I do.
Hmm.
You don't have to. I try to let people know that because they'll take that on thinking that you have to do this.
No,
It's fard
exactly.
or it's mesnoon to the degree that it's mujma alayh. And it's like, no. It's not agreed upon. It's something that's done to where, you have to do it. Like, I might have a thing where, and in my own private life, because of the ruling about shuhum, about cooking using animal fat,
Mm.
right? Now, for me, if I cook, let's say I cook beef or chicken or whatever else in a pot or in a skillet. After that, I'll wash the skillet. I won't cook it with the juice from that meat, like vegetables or whatever. I won't cook it using that
Hmm.
because I will take the most stringent ruling on there. But I don't do this to other people though.
Mm. Oh.
So, oh yeah, Brother Jaffer, I notice people sometimes notice. I noticed that you put your meat in last, like you put
Mm.
in olive oil, then you put in your fruit and veg, then you put your chicken and everything. You put that in last. Yeah, because I don't want to cook it in the oil of the meat because that
Hmm.
that would be haram to the strictest ruling. But I don't say that to other people. Normally notice that as like a quirk.
No.
When they see me doing it, it looks more like a quirk.
Yes.
But it is. But there's a ruling behind it. But I try not to get too deeply into it
SubhanAllah.
so that people assume that you have to do it this way. There's only this way
Mm.
because people will take it away and be like, yeah, it's haram across the board, but it's not. Yes, there is a hadith for it, but understanding the hadith that way is a minority opinion.
No.
And there's other things like that I do besides this, that have just become part of my amal that I do that aren't, uh, mujma alayh or aren't the mu'tamid,
Mm.
but it's just stringent and that's what I do.
I've been in cases where I'm asked a particular fiqh question or like an adab related question, and I cannot recall immediately the statement from the hadith or from the fiqh books, but what I do recall often is, what did I see my teacher doing? And
Mm,
then I recall the moment and I relate the moment.
yeah,
So it's so serious the impact of the teacher, like
yeah.
every example that he gives.
Yeah, and it's important because sometimes if you're like, okay, well, I know of this person being trustworthy.
Hmm.
And so because I know of this person being trustworthy in this area, if I saw them doing this thing, it's going to be based on something. So until I can get to the bottom of what the answer is, I'll abide by this. And that's safe.
Exactly, yes.
That's safer than trying to come to another conclusion and everything else. It's like,
Subhanallah.
listen, once I get to the bottom, I'll just do this because this is what I know until I can get further data. But in the meantime, I know because he or she is trustworthy in this
Hmm.
field, I'll be fine to deal with this.
Subhanallah.
And then you
No,
go from there.
it's incredible.
Huh?
Subhanallah. I had basically one or two more remaining questions for you, Sheikh. Is that
Huh?
in regards to the Sheikh Abdul Ghani Ibn Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, do we know of any descendants of his today alive?
Any descendants of his.
Hmm.
Alhamdulillah. Rasulillah. Now, when you look at the Banu Qudamah or the Ibn Sarur family,
Hmm.
they later merged into the Ibn Abdul Hadi family. So the Ibn Abdul Hadi family is actually the continuation
Okay,
of
subhanallah.
the Bani Qudama. They're their continuation, right?
Mm.
And they've continued on into the Ibn al-Hanbali family. So now the Ibn
Mm.
al-Hanbali family have people today in there's an Ibn al-Hanbali that was in Damascus
Mm.
that also was a teacher to because he was a teacher at the same time around the same time as Abdul Qadir Al-Qassab, who was one of the teachers of Sheikh Wahba al-Zuhaili, the big Shafi Marja. One of his teachers in Hadith and others was Abdul Qadir Al-Qassab, who was a big wali of Allah. Or well, another teacher was an Ibn al-Hanbali from that time period. And so he was around during that time. So that we know that he was there during that time. And there was an Ibn al-Hanbali that was also one of the signatories of the fatwa regarding Palestine. He was also a signatory to that fatwa, and that was 1967. So
Mm.
we do know that the family is still around. But off the top of my head, right now, like
Hmm.
a current item right now, current, because that's really recent. because Imam Wahid al-Zuhaydi is quite recent. Right? That's
Subhanallah.
recent. But if you're asking me to think of someone contemporary now that's teaching, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to think.
Sure, no problem. The Banu Qudamah family and the what do we call them? Sheikh Abdul Ghani's family. Is it Banu Surur?
Yes, the Banu Surur.
Okay.
Yes.
These two families, they intermarried and then they became the Ibn Abdul Hadi family.
Yes.
Okay, subhanallah. The final thing actually that I want to ask you about is that we named many of these noble scholars and also common people from Palestine, but even though the people from Palestine are struggling today, we can't deny that their situation today has changed, meaning it is not as it was before, so we see some nationalistic and secular influence. Where did this thing begin? Like, how did this happen?
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Um, with Palestinians, the nationalism that you started to see in the Rihla by Imam Abdullah Sufyan al-Qadumi rahimahullah, you can see him expressing concern at that time. And he
Okay.
dies 1331. Hijaz, rahimahullah. You can see him expressing concern about a more secularizing policy of the Palestinians. If you look at pictures of Palestine in the Kaffir calendar of, say, 150 years ago, 170 years ago, you can see that you could see some signs of secularization, people kind of uncovered sometimes. You see the men sometimes wearing certain types of clothes or uncovered. You can see some of those things where they're, starting to veer off a little bit. And this has to do with the arrival of the French in Sham, the battles between the French and the British over the territory. Yeah, you start to see these types of things that are happening. And then with the rise of the nation state nationalism. So around the 1840s, the idea of nations based on national identity, some type of shared national identity, like a German national state. And you can only be citizens if you're a German national. The idea of those states, that thinking starts to penetrate other parts of the world.
Oh.
And so this idea of a national state starts to come into the fore. And in fact, what ultimately led to the battle of the Waqf issue with regard to the attempt to break up Palestine, the battles that are happening now, some of that was the result of nationalism. So the people that wanted their own piece of the pie, where you had some of the Ashraf of Mecca and al-Medina being driven out by their people for practicing treachery. They said that. They later become the royal family of Jordan. They later become that royal family. And those people wind up wrenching a portion of Palestine away from its Waqf status to create this fabricated new nation called Jordan. And then you have other things happening after that. So all of these things, you see them going back to the rise of the nation state identity and Palestinians getting involved in that. And then coupled with the nation state identity, you also see the rise of socialism. And because socialism starts to express itself as a viable alternative to capitalism, another recent idea, and because socialism starts to see some successes, there are two common streams within socialism. One of them being communism and another one being anarchism. And because those two seem to have successful alternatives to capitalism, people start gravitating towards them. So you'll see before the rise of some of the Mujaddid groups and other groups within Palestine, you see the first rise of communist groups, socialist groups, anarchist groups. But then on the back of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes tajdeed to occur. And the tajdeed occurs among those. So the tajdeed happens around 1395 Hijri. You start to see some tajdeed happening. And the tajdeed happens with the rise of Muslims starting to look more deeply into the Awqaf. What is the masjid about? What is all this about?
Subhanallah.
You have Muslim brothers that had left from Palestine and studied in other places and came back. You had the sheikhs that are working within, like Sheikh Huwayqir, and Sheikh Huwayqir, who fought against the British, he fought against the others, he becomes a hero. Sheikh Musa al-Ahmed. These types of people work tirelessly with Palestinians to move away from the nation state model and towards a model that's based on being a hardworking Muslim, and that your most important identity is Muslim, and the land of Palestine isn't the land of Palestine because of blood. It's the Waqf that was established. It was like trying to remind people of these things, right? So you see about 150 years worth of these things and this battle that's happened. And now what's now occurred to the minds of Palestinians today is they've seen that the nationalistic movements have been defanged. The first thing that they did to the nationalistic movements is that they were declawed. They had no real power because they couldn't make happen what they were supposed to have happen because they're not based on anything.
Right.
They weren't grounded in anything because you removed the Islam, or even the Palestinian Christians removed the Christianity. So you had al-Aswad, Black September, Palestinian National Liberation Front. Once George Habash started going towards a more secular model, right? The front for the liberation of Palestine, the FLN, all these other groups that were just solely based. Then you have Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which had Muslims and Christians, but was more secular. Once they saw that, okay, we've been declawed. Now, once they've declawed you and taken away the things that gave you your strength, the next thing is to defang you, which is to just remove your ability to even defend yourself. And now you see the people that are able to defend themselves, that are able to strive, that are able to do things, they're the people that have not lost the blood and guts of what gave them success, what made them most. That blood and guts is this deen. And you'll find the people that are having the most success right now is out of all of them is those 12 jama'at. They're the ones that are giving them the most difficulty because they will not stop, and they're leaning back on their Islam.
Right.
This is because Islam is the base, it's the most important. And among the armed groups that aren't Muslim, the ones that haven't are the Orthodox Christians. The PNLF have fallen more heavily back on their Orthodox Christian, things. The Shuhada Mustafa Al, those groups, like those are hardened Christians that are, shouting Jesus is Lord in the West Bank and firing mortar rounds. Like they're falling back on what they that's major shirk. We get it. But the point that I'm trying to make is the Palestinians that are having the successes are having successes based upon going back to what it was that made them something. For the Muslims of the Palestinians, it's this religion. Because even Christians, Palestinians that are Christians, know that it was safer and better when the Waqf was unified. Because the churches were looked after, the churches weren't affected. All these other things, these things were protected. You've got Palestinian Jews that are coming out saying we want to have a future where there isn't an Israeli government. They're saying, and it's because they understand that the whole idea of a state in which you remove the bedrock of religion, and with the bedrock of religion comes all the other things: family, right and wrong, etiquette, manners, all these other things that are considered, that you and I know as absolutes. Manners and etiquettes are absolutes. There is an objective right and wrong. There is a good and evil. There is this. And the most developed, because the Orthodox Christians, they don't have a detailed code of canon law. So they depend on the Muslims to carry out these things and to establish. They depend on the Muslims to do this. So they understand that it's best that the Muslims are doing what they're doing. Developed strategies regarding war. We have detailed books of jihad The Orthodox Christians don't have a canon of law on how to conduct warfare.
Subhanallah.
So that's why when they did the killings at the Olympics, and they killed, like, why are you killing Olympic athletes? Why are you killing, people that, like, this isn't anything that, like, they don't have developed laws on these matters.
Wow.
And because it's not developed, there's no developed details. They'll do just about anything. But for us as Muslims, you don't do just about anything. You have to stay within the bounds of the revealed law. And that the most important thing is that the Waqf is a protection, not just for masjids, but for churches, for monks' cloisters, for nuns, for the nunneries, for the gardens, for even synagogues, because there are synagogues that are older than the state of Israel, but because they're Sepharad, which is the branch that's different to the Jews that came there, they're being destroyed. Because some of those Jews from Europe don't want there to be proof that there was a Judaism in Israel before they arrived, because the whole point is that there wasn't supposed to be anyone in the land. The land was supposed to be empty before they arrived. So they're destroying synagogues, Sephardic synagogues that predate their arrival, because they also show that Islam was there and that Jews were functioning there. But the whole point is to show that the land was either empty or Jews were a persecuted minority and they couldn't survive under Muslims. But if there's synagogues that are older, that are older than when the Muslims arrived, and there's synagogues and they're still functioning from after the Muslims arrived, 1,600-year-old synagogues, 1,700-year-old synagogues. If those are there, that means that after the Muslims arrived, they didn't do anything to them. And that pokes holes in that whole narrative. So this is a fight to protect all of that. First of all, the Shar, number one, and the Waqf status, but within that is to also protect those religions, because they're living in that Waqf of Palestine, they are our responsibility too. The Jews that are living in Palestine and the Christians, they're our responsibility too. That's why it's a Muslim that opens the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's Muslim troops that guard the church in Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity. That's our responsibility. We have to be responsible, right? That's the thing about it. And that's why you'll hear a Greek Orthodox Arab patriarch say, if all the muezzins are killed in Gaza, I'll make the adhan. He's not Muslim. He says that because he remembers the protection that Muslims have provided. That the oldest church in Gaza wasn't destroyed or bombed by Muslim brothers. It was aerial bombardment by the children of Israel. That the damage that the Church of the Nativity has suffered more damage under the children of Israel than it has in the entire 1,800 years it's been standing. And we're agreed that Nabiyuna Isa, like the Christians and the Muslims, we're agreed that there's a spot at the entrance of that church. There's a spot where Nabiyuna Isa alayhi salam was supposed to have been born. And we're agreed on that spot. And the Christians, out of respect for us, because they know that we say that the Eucharist, these other things are major shirk, they've moved their altar and everything else, they've moved it back so that it's not there, so that we can both visit that spot. So this battle, these things that are happening, is for the protection of everything we consider sacred. Everything. Because there's aspects that the Christians hold that, yeah, that's true. When Nabiyuna Isa Islam was born, yeah, that's true. That's sacred. The Via Dolorosa. Now, we know that that's not true, that Nabiyuna Isa Islam was crucified. That's not true. But we're not going to try to destroy the Via Dolorosa, which is supposed to be the spot. They say, the Christians say, Nabiyuna Isa Islam walked that strip on the way to crucifixion up to Golgotha. The children of Israel that have came from Europe have tried to destroy that area or pave over it. So there's been fighting. And sometimes Muslims have tried. It was Muslims that found a Torah scroll that almost was destroyed during the war to take over all of Jerusalem for the state of Israel in 1967. Muslims found that Torah scroll and returned it to the rabbis of the area to make sure it didn't get destroyed. It's like, why? Because we have a responsibility. We're not just responsible for ourselves, but because you're a Muslim, because you're not Muslim and you're under our governance, we're responsible for you too. In Dar al-Islam, the kuffar, Muslims are responsible for them too. And that's why Muslims are protecting the churches and all this other stuff. That's why. That's why. Not because we believe in Christianity. It's major shirk. But those people are our responsibility. We have to protect them because they're under our governance and we'll be asked about them.
I actually wonder, Sheikh, we know that the rule of Islam is run by the ulama, but the current constitution of Palestine, what is it actually?
Well, there is no constitution over Palestine. What
Okay.
there is there's different groups that are controlling areas.
Hmm.
So in the West Bank, the Israeli government entered into a joint partnership with the Palestinian Authority, which is secular, with
Hmm.
Christians like Hanan al-Ashrawi
Right.
and others that are there. Whereas Gaza is under those 12 jama'at that are out there, the
Right.
biggest
Right.
of which
Subhanallah.
is the حركة الجهاد الإسلامي في فلسطين and الحركة المقاومة الإسلامية and also the Kita'ib al-Qassam. Those are the three biggest, along with
Interesting.
Shuhada Nablus, which is Shuhada Nablus is attempting to keep the rest of Nablus established under Shara. But the areas under PA control, those are areas where they're trying to establish what the president, because he wants to be the president over all Palestinians, they're trying to establish some sort of modern secular democratic state. So there's a battle
Hmm.
that's happening to protect Shara for there, to protect Shara in Gaza, to protect Shara in the West Bank. Whereas Jordan, it's not a battle to protect Shara because Jordan has Shara, but it's been wrenched away from the rest of the Waqf, which it shouldn't be. It should be back with the
Hmm.
rest of it, which is why there have been attempts to remove the royal family from power because
Subhanallah.
they know that
Hmm.
they're not supposed to be where they are and that they've lied and stolen. They know
Hmm.
that.
Subhanallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh, for the explanation. Now, as a final thing, what should we Muslims take away from the life of this noble Sheikh Abdul Ghani Al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Rasulillah. I would say that there are three things you should take away from the life of this Imam. Three things. One is we should acquaint ourselves with the Quran because he acquainted himself with the Quran on a regular basis. So we want to acquaint ourselves with the Quran on a regular basis. And number two, with his Sunnah. And the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we're all familiar with, whether this be obtaining books such as the Umdat al-Ahkam, the Sughra, or the Riyadh al-Salihin, or the 40 Hadith of Imam Nawawi, we want to acquaint ourselves with the Sunnah and with the Quran. To make reading of the Quran a regular habit, because you have to remember when he's making all these extra salawat, extra raka'at, he's doing all those extra things because he's reciting Quran. He's reciting Quran. He's going through all these extra du'as he's doing. He's making du'as. So he has to do all of these things. And so to get the reward and the blessings, to get those same rewards, and blessings, we want to do the same thing. So to acquaint ourselves with the Quran and the Sunnah. Number two, number two, we want to make sure that we make goals for ourselves because the Shaykh, rahimahullah, he made goals. And when he made those goals, he made a strong niyyah and he looked to establish those goals.
Hmm.
He made short-term goals and he made long-term goals. And every goal that you make is a stepping stone to another. That's why he already had the Hidayah committed to memory. So when he got to Baghdad, he could get on with the long-term goal
SubhanAllah.
of hearing fiqh and working on hadith and doing other things. So you commit short-term goals, commit to long-term goals. So we should have goals that we want to have as a believer. And those goals should start off with slow, because you have long-term goals, but you can't get to the long-term goals without getting to the
Hmm.
short-term goals.
SubhanAllah.
So you have to set stair-step pattern goals. Third and final thing is we should desire sincerely to make dua for this sheikh all the other great ulama of the past. And people wonder at this time, I want to feel close to the brothers and sisters in Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, in Palestine, wherever they are, I want to feel close to them. Okay. Well, the area to do that then is to learn from the books of these people.
Subhanallah.
So you have Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi. You have the other Abdul Ghani Al-Nabulsi, who was the big Hanafi sheikh from Palestine. He's a Palestinian. You have the Imam Ratib al-Nabulsi, who's another Palestinian. You have so many great sheikhs and scholars who are Palestinians who are there today and were yesteryear.
Mhm.
The Qutb ibn Abdul Hadi, right? These people, Mari ibn Yusuf al-Karmi, right? Every time you access these books, every time you access this literature, every time you reflect on these men and what they've established, every time you do that, you're getting reward. They're getting rewarded, inshallah, and you're getting reward as part of these people.
Subhanallah.
You're sharing in that reward. And you're getting some of those blessings of keeping that long line from the time that it was declared as Waqf by Umar all the way up until this time today. You're part of that long chain. And as you see, no matter what happens, Palestinians aren't going anywhere. They're not going
Subhanallah.
anywhere because they are people that are still sticking to their iman. Number two, they're still having the big families and they're fighting on and have not lost their sense of resolve. They're not going anywhere. They will suffer setbacks, but they're not going anywhere. And so to be part of that reward, to be part of that blessing is to take from those ulama that are also part of that blessing, right? So some of those ulama include, some of those sheikhs include living Mustahamdu Ulayan, right? Other sheikhs that are Palestinian, right? To take advantage of them, the living and the previous sheikhs as well, right? Like I said, Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, Abdul Ghani Al-Nabulsi, right? All these big imams, when you open when you grab that book from the shelf and you open the pages of that book, the moment you start reading those pages, you start benefiting from the blessings. You start taking hold of those blessings. You start getting the goodness from those the moment you open that book. And when you do that, you're carrying on that legacy of the great people of Palestine. Even though you may not ethnically be Palestinian, you're sharing with them in the blessing, and you are an inheritor of that waqf. So if you dedicate some dua, some dhikr, some other things, khatams of the Quran that you do, azkar and du'as that you do, they receive it. They receive it.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and thank you for your time, Shaykh. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to have mercy upon the Imam, his teachers, and his family, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory to the people of Palestine.
Inshallah.
Give the last word to you in closing the recording, inshallah.
In closing, I want to say that one of the things that people forget is that they are mentioning about what's going on with the people of Palestine and what people should do and these other things. But what they're not doing and not giving people their right to is they're forgetting and not mentioning the Mujaddid.
Subhanallah.
There should be far more people asking in public and otherwise, to give victory to the Mujahideen and to give them strength because they're the defenders of those people. Those are the people that are going to defend the Christians and the Jews there and the Muslims over and above them. But those are the people that are going to defend them. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them victory, gives them strength, gives them protection, right? Because these are difficult times. But these are things that must happen because without none of this is important. Without the waqf and these other things, the rest of it won't be realizable. If you can't protect the waqf, you can't protect the other things, you can't protect all the other stuff. And you have to have the waqf in place. You have to have all these things. And that's what this fight is about. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the mujahideen and protect them and give them strength to strive and to give them victory and to let them meet their objectives in this difficult time of trials and tribulations.
آمين.
So we say, ونسلم ونبارك على سيدنا ونبينا ورسولنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم أجمعين يا حميد الراحمين. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. لا إله إلا الله ولا نعبد إلا إياه، له النعمة والفضل والثناء الحسن الجميل. لا إله إلا الله مخلصين له الدين ولو كره الكافرون. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم لا مانع لما أعطيت ولا معطي لما منعت ولا ينفع ذا الجد منك الجد. اللهم اغفر لنا المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات والمحسنين والمحسنات والمجاهدين والمناقبات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم انصر المجاهدين في فلسطين، اللهم انصر المجاهدين في كل مكان. اللهم اعز الإسلام والمسلمين وذل الشرك والمشركين والذين ينصرون من أعداء الدين والمرتدين والمنافقين. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا ورسولنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم أجمعين يا حميد الراحمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين ولا إله إلا الله.